The cancellation happened just as the DPRK confirmed the demolition of its nuclear test site on Thursday. CGTN reporter Han Peng is among the international journalists invited to watch the process. He brings us this report from Punggye-ri in the DPRK.
This is Northern Tunnel number 2, where the DPRK has conducted its most recent 5 nuclear tests. It's now all ridden with explosives, ready to be blown up. Now, this is the tunnel number 4. The DPRK says it is designed to carry out what they call very powerful nuclear tests. It was never used before, and now it's also coming down. This is the very first and very last time the media is able to see these tunnels, right here in Punggye-ri.
3, 2, 1.
At around 11 a.m. on Thursday local time, the DPRK ignited explosives in tunnel number 2. Within just a few seconds, the tunnels that have been used for 12 years of nuclear tests has now become
Today's explosion proved very successful, and as you can see, the northern tunnel of the nuclear test grounds was completely destructed, and all the entrances of the tunnel were completely blocked.
By 4 p.m., Tunnel 2, 3, 4 have all been blasted. The DPRK says Tunnel 1, which was not shown to us, was abandoned after the country's first nuclear test in 2006. Now, this is what Tunnel 3 looks like after the explosions. But without weapon expert here on the ground, we cannot independently verify whether the nuclear test site has been fully dismantled. Besides, experts are divided over whether the repeated tests may have already caused disastrous leaks of radiation, and whether the blast on Thursday could cause more environmental consequences. The DPRK denies the claims. The DPRK did not allow reporters to bring Geiger counters, which are used to detect radiation. And this is the only safety equipment that we have here on the testing ground. And right behind me, as you can see, some reporters did bring their face masks. Some of them even brought full-body hazmat. They say, better safe than sorry. What are the measures taken to prevent radiation? This military official, who refused to give us his name and title, briefly responded to my question. He said that in some tunnels, no test was conducted, and that in tunnel number 2, there is, quote, neither radiation leak nor adverse impact on ecological environment during the tests. We are now on a winding mountain road connecting different tunnels, and right there is tunnel number 2, which the DPRK uses to conduct 5 out of 6 nuclear tests before. And right here we can see the mountains have been covered by thick plants, and we can even hear the sound of the birds right above our head. Amid suspicions and doubts, the DPRK has made a high-profile move to cease the nuclear tests. But the world is still divided over whether this is just a goodwill gesture or a genuine move toward denuclearization.
Let's get you more on this story. I'm joined live from Johannesburg by Brooks Spector, a former American diplomat and international relations analyst expert. He's live for us in Johannesburg. Brooks, thank you very much for joining us. The world is facing anxious moments ahead after the cancellation of that summit between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un. How are African countries likely to be affected by this decision?
Well, let's take first things first. Although the meeting between the two national leaders is now presumably off, the door is not absolutely closed, because if you heard this morning's news, the North Korean government announced that their president was prepared to meet Donald Trump in the future, and the Trump letter, idiosyncratic though it was, hinted at the possibility that they might yet still meet some point down the road. So I don't think it's fair to say that there will never be a meeting and that there will never be talks. Having said that, though, I think the way African nations are going to respond to this is very cautiously, because the worries that they would likely bring to this are, will this so distract others, important others in the international arena, that all the attention will now be focused on the rise in tensions on the Korean Peninsula as opposed to other issues, development, world trade, and all the rest. So I think there's a certain amount of caution and certain cautious pessimism, but not utter horror, certainly not predictions of imminent doom and gloom. If I might add, one of the things that I think probably worries African leaders and policymakers more is the beginnings of the fraying of the Iran nuclear accord with the United States pullout, because remember, much of the world's oil comes from, if not Iran, but the area immediately around it on the Persian Gulf, and that has if that were to be obstructed or blocked because of hostilities or embargoes or whatever, that would have a serious deleterious effect on the global economy, Africa included.
Now, President Trump seems to favor an assertive and aggressive leadership style. Should African countries lower their expectations of a beneficial relationship with the U.S.?
Well, I think that what we've learned over the last year and some months is that Donald Trump conducts his foreign policy agenda both with one eye on his overwhelming mantra about America first, and his other eye looking at all of the agreements, all of the understandings, all of the arrangements in a very transactional way, much as you would if you were a businessman or woman operating at a retail sales point. And so I think that a lot of African policymakers are going to look very carefully at any future negotiations. And as we know, the Trump administration does not like the idea of multilateral negotiations and agreements very much anyway. If I were an African policymaker, I would be thinking ahead to the expiration of the African Growth and Opportunity Act, that unilateral reduction in tariffs passed by the United States. It has a number of years left to run, but any negotiations for bilateral or group tariff and trade tariff reductions and trade expansion, probably should be starting already, because they're complicated, they're time-consuming, and there are many actors. So in sum, if I were an African policymaker, I'd be looking just over the horizon right now at the kind of negotiations that might still be possible with an administration that focuses so intently on what's in it for me.
All right, Brooks, thank you very much for those insights. Brooks Spector live for us there in Johannesburg.